Hi, everyone. We are back right on time with Mystery in Motion, African American Spirituality in Mardi Gras. This panel is sponsored by the Louisiana State Museum, who actually has an exhibit coming out by the same name, opening hopefully in January. So we're getting a little preview of what the Louisiana State Museum is going to be offering visually here with some of the people who are featured in that exhibit. The exhibit was curated in part by our moderator for this evening, Kim Vaz-Deville. Kim Vaz-Deville is many things. She is the grandmother to Alana and AJ. She's an awesome human being who you can just talk to about anything as if you've known her your whole life. She also has a long career in academia, most recently with Xavier University. She's also the author of 2 books, and you guys might recognize, if you're familiar with One Book, One New Orleans, one of the titles. It's called The Baby Dolls: Breaking the Race and Gender Barriers of the New Orleans Mardi Gras Tradition. That's a long title. And that was our 2016 selection for One Book, One New Orleans. With that relationship, it was really cool. I actually interviewed one of the baby dolls, Merlene Kimball, and Kim asked me if I could use that interview for her second book, which is The Baby Dolls, Walking Ratty, The Baby Dolls of New Orleans. And we had this really amazing launch at Xavier. So that is to say that Kim knows the organization really well. She knows our mission really well. And she is a huge supporter of literacy in this city and generously brings her time, talent, and effort to things like curating this panel for us. So welcome, Kim.
Thank you so much. That was a lovely introduction. Hello, everybody. I am happy to share with you today a sneak peek of an upcoming exhibit at the Presbytere, sponsored by the Louisiana State Museum, who, as Megan said, they are kindly sponsoring us, our panel today. This exhibit emerged out of an experience I had on a trip with many of my colleagues. We went to Cuba to find out, to locate different research and learning sites for students. And I went into one of the museums, the Casa de Africa, and when I emerged from that, I imagined the Indians here with the different colors of the Orisha. And from there, I began to look at different spiritual themes that I began to recognize within contemporary masking. And I wanted to bring that experience and that education to the Louisiana State Museum for all of us, because on Mardi Gras Day, it's really hard to take in all the different symbols that are there, and they are just numerous. And so this gives us a chance to look at what contemporary African American maskers are incorporating spiritually into their suits and costumes and performance, and allow us to meditate and have a space of reflection upon how they're bringing us their spirituality in a day that we largely commemorate with having a great time. So this exhibit introduces a broad range of American maskers to our community who have been incorporating spiritual themes into their Mardi Gras experiences and providing that to all of us, but we don't have a chance to really look at it. So this is an invitation to the community to come and have a conversation about the spiritual figures and themes that are going into their masking practices. Of course, this dovetails with the Afro-diasporic sacred traditions, which have long combined African and New World religious expression into new forms for centuries, of which our African American Mardi Gras traditions are unique to New Orleans. The black masking in New Orleans has gained national attention, but its spiritual roots are unknown. So Mystery in Motion is going to amplify the voices of Black maskers sharing the cultural and spiritual context of their traditions. The exhibit will focus on Black masking rituals, drawing from spiritual sources, including the Yoruba belief system, New Orleans voodoo, of voodoo itself, Catholicism, Islam, Rastafarianism, and many more. The exhibit explores Black masking in New Orleans and its foundations in our African heritage. I am one of the guest curators, and Ron Bechet is the other guest co-curator. And we have borrowed artifacts from both the Quai Branly Museum, Quai Branly Jacques Chirac Museum in Paris, and from the African Collection of Southern University at New Orleans. So there will be all kinds of photographs and images and artifacts and things that will be in the 2,700 square foot exhibition, which is adjacent to the permanent Mardi Gras exhibit at the Presbytere. And we're going to have an online component that will present a virtual tour, supplementary images and interviews, and K through 12 educational materials. And we'll have programming all throughout the year, including virtual programs, hands-on workshops, lectures, special tours, and family days. I'd like to go now to our panelists who will be participating in the exhibit. They bring collectively a rich experience to this panel and to the exhibit. I'll first introduce the Divine Prince Ty Emmecca, who's a Pan-African spiritualist, practitioner, advisor, psychic, spiritualist, voodoo priest, and practitioner of African traditional religious systems. The Divine Prince is also a local New Orleans actor and cultural performer in the historic Treme. He's a longtime member and advisor to the Congo Square Preservation Society and is a masking New Orleans Black Carnival Indian, as well as a licensed registered minister. He's been active in ministry for over 45 years, formerly serving as Minister of Music in the Black Spiritualist and Apostolic Churches. So thank you so much for being with us on this panel. Our next panelist is Shaka Zulu. Shaka Zulu is a practicing Black masking Indian who is a lecturer on the rich history and folklore of our New Orleans traditions. He and his wife have owned the Golden Feather Mardi Gras Indian Gallery, and he runs that as one of the most unique establishments in the city, which features his lectures for tourists visiting from around the world and locals as well. He is an entrepreneur. He's a musician traveling the world playing percussive instruments with his company Zulu Connection and many notable New Orleans jazz musicians. He's an innovator in African traditions. He's also the first Black masking Indian who is also an Indian stilt dancer, 14 feet in the air. He's committed to the growth and educational prosperity of the youth in New Orleans, and so he manages and is an instructor for the Youth Summer Cultural Enrichment Camp of the Better Life Family, Incorporated in New Orleans. So we welcome you, Chief. And our final participant is Peter Mohammed Haroon. He's a poet and spoken word artist, and he shares empowering, inspiring messages in distinct rhythms. He was a founding member of the New Orleans, I'm going to get that right, NOMO? Yes, NOMO Literary Society in 1995, and since then has practiced ongoing creativity with words, sounds, and stories through numerous poems and poetry readings locally and throughout the nation. His work is published in the 2020 anthology titled I Am New Orleans, 36 Poets Revisit Marcus Christian's Definitive Poem, and the 1998 anthology From a Bend in the River, 100 New Orleans Poets. In 96, he moved to Chicago to the headquarters, to be near the headquarters of the Nation of Islam as a registered member. He's been serving in this capacity as a student in the Ministry of Art and Culture ever since, building with creatives across genres and demographics. For decades, he's been called upon to bring his poetry to numerous cultural, spiritual, and community events. In 2018, he was invited to compose a poem and perform a poetry reading to bless the kickoff of an international tour of peace drums. And in 2020, he was called on to craft a tribute poem to Mr. Ellis Marcellus. And he then recorded the piece to music he collaboratively composed and co-produced. So welcome to Peter, our trail chief for the Golden Feather Hunters, Mardi Gras Indian tribe. So thank you all first for participating in the exhibit. You are going to be reaching an additional audience that needs to know what you're all about. So I'm going to start with Peter and ask him to tell me your role in Black Mardi Gras and how you connect it to spirituality.
Well, that's a good question. I'm hearing the echo. Okay, we go. So thank y'all, first of all, for having this gathering and giving a platform for this conversation, this dialogue. So I'm a native New Orleanian, and it was interesting. I'm gonna take it back a little bit, if you allow me, Dr. Kim. I was introduced to participating in carnival and things of that nature through music, through marching bands. Right, I played music in bands, and once I got to high school at St. Augustine, Mr. Hampton, I was a student of Mr. Hampton from 3rd grade all the way up until I got to high school. And he used to share the stories with me about how they were the first Black school to integrate Mardi Gras, and he kind of spoke to me a little off record a lot of times because there was a certain pride that had to go along with it being public, but there was a certain conflict that he had to go through internally in presenting the art. And he told me about the preparation that he had to give to the students in the band at that time because of a hostility that existed in the street. And it was akin to the movement that Dr. King and them would have, in that, okay, if you spit on them, you respond like this. If somebody kicks you, you respond like that, right? And to see the pain that he had to have by being that first to go through that sort of experience, but the dignity he went through it with because of what it is that he represented. And for those who may not know about Mr. Hampton and what he did for especially for young Black males in the city, is that he gave us an outlet to be musicians at a time where there was a conflict about keeping the sacred art going, right? So in him bringing those many young Black men to the forefront on Carnival Day to change the tradition and the history of what it is that Carnival looked like and what Mardi Gras looked like, it allowed for the placement from his stories that he would share with me. It would allow for him to show the best part of us as artists in a way, as young high school students, in a way that it would force the city to respect us, right? With the discipline and with the mastery of our art form, and just going through that experience, I was conflicted, right? Because at that time it's a Catholic high school, and we went out and we would have the American flag in front of the band. You would have the flags of all the other Josephite schools, the color guards would carry the flag. And so there were so many signs and symbols, like you mentioned, that allowed for us to exist in an integrated state with the rest of what Carnival looked like. And that integrated state came at a cost of what it is that we can determine we'll fly, what flags and symbols we would represent and attach to our culture. So going through that experience and actually participating in the parades and having those experiences from the beginning to the parade to the end, and you're seeing the energy of the people, and you're seeing people love the culture. They don't know why. It's a spiritual, something happens to the people as they stand there and listen to us play music, as we pass and as the parade progresses. Something would hit their spirit that was unexplainable to me at that time. So when I came back to participate from a history of like not inclusionary type of stuff. Like I'm not doing this because someone wants to include us in their beautiful, civilized, culture, right? And nobody want to include us until they savagery that they're going to display on this day. It gave me an opportunity to, one, see the discipline and the spiritual significance that I had and what I represented as a Black man on that day. And it also allowed me to see that I inspired people with what it is I was gifted with. So it was just a natural progression to see, now that I'm an adult, as a grown man, the honor and the respect that I take when we hit these streets, in the suit, representing the ancient culture, representing something that can't be confined, representing something that can't be diluted to where it tastes better. Now it's easier to see because you know that these are some well-behaved people and they're going to behave like this, and these are their value systems. And I felt like we were always more powerful than that, and this city would suppress that and exploit our creative expression. So one of the things that I take dearly as a practitioner in this culture, I'm the trail chief for Golden Feather. And one of my greatest responsibilities is to ensure that the chief, once he leaves, that he returns, and that while he's on those streets, that nothing comes behind us to sneak up on us. Like nothing comes and like catches him off guard because behind him he doesn't have anybody, right? So what that does for me is allow me to have a perspective on the whole thing. I'm a part of it, but I'm away from it. And what my job, I feel, is to let people know that this is a spiritual activity taking place. Like this is a sacred, we are performing sacred rituals to heal our people. And it's not for mere entertainment, and it's not for mockery. And one of the most difficult things that I have with my responsibility is when people want to take me away from me focusing on Chief and making sure he has what he has to take a picture with him. Like, I don't know how everybody else feel and if their position allow for them to think differently, but in mine, it's a real difficult thing to do unless it's from a child. Then it's not even a thought. You know what I mean? You have to do that for that child so that you can give them that spirit to keep pushing forward. But for some adults, I want to remind people that this is a culture and this is a practice that's in place to preserve the integrity of our culture, to preserve the ability to pass down through our lineage and through our descendants something that is ancient to us. And it's not a joke. It's not a game. It's not a mockery thing. It's not a thing that I'm doing because I want popularity, a thing that I want to do so that I can be bigger than the culture. So my practice is that. Yep.
Shaka?
Yes, you can hear me? You can hear me? You on mute. I can't hear you.
I can hear you.
Okay.
We can hear you.
So question is, how do I get into this very unique culture? One of the things about myself, I came into this unique masking culture, and we say masking, because I feel that once you put a mask on, you're not a person anymore. You're the energy or the entity of what it is that you're masking. And that's an African tradition. So I actually was initiated into a mask society before I was involved in the masking Indian tradition. So I can relate 100% with Brother Peter is talking about, because I have a different discipline as well as perspective on a culture as it relates to a masking tradition. So I was initiated into the Masking Stilt Dance Society, which is my family tradition that comes from my dad, and I got two brothers that's involved. I'm also with Better Family Life. We train children about their tradition and culture, and also we've traveled the world with it. We've put it on a stage as a production. So even though I'm immersed in the culture of the masking Indians for over 20 years, but the majority of my masking tradition came from another masking culture, which is African culture. So I came in through the musical side of it, playing the drums for the Indians. And my first experience with the tradition professionally was with Chief Smiley Ricks with Indians of the Nation. But mind you, I grew up since a child in the performing arts as it relates to African culture and tradition, because my dad have a group called Free Spirit that's been around for probably since the first African drum hit the city of New Orleans. So we talking about the 70s on to now. So I grew up in the tradition and the culture as it relates to African tradition in the streets of New Orleans. So the masking Indian part was very easy for me because I already understood the concept, my role as a Black man in it, and the responsibility that comes with that. Understanding that now that I'm a chief, being the chief represent a neighborhood, which represents a community. And so I look at it from a perspective of, if you want to find out what type of chief you are, just look at the condition of the women and children in that community. And that says a lot about the chief in that community. So I try to practice it from that perspective. And also I'm open to where if there's anything that I display that doesn't represent that responsibility, please call me out on it. So the street ballet or the masking part of it, it's easy for me because I was already pretty much deep into the role of and responsibility of street processions with the stilt thing. But I really believe that this culture represents something that's coming from an ancient spirit. I always say it's the last culture in America that started by Africans born in America that's still in its original form. It's self-taught, self-sustained, self-funded. The reason we did it many years ago, is the same reason we do it today. And Big Chief Downer Harrison said something that was very important. He said it's Afro-New Orleans music and culture. It's one of the few African traditions that you may not find in Africa because that African tradition was born right here in New Orleans. So I'm versed in it on many different levels, the music, the sewing, the masking tradition, understanding the African part in the masking tradition, as well as being born and raised in New Orleans. So for me, it was just a labor of love. I love that the culture involved children because part of my life mission is working with children. That's why with Golden Feather, being a chief, one of the things I'm really happy about is we do have a lot of children, thanks to Dr. Kim bringing all those kids in. So I really love that because if you don't teach your children the culture, then you will become a victim of their ignorance. So it's very important for me to make sure that, the women and children are in this culture and learning from people who are displaying this culture in a very positive way. So I just love it. And I learned from some of the best in this culture as it relates to what it represents and the craftsmanship, the workload, the responsibility, the folklore, and all of that. So I'm just happy to be in a position to be honored with a platform to really speak on that behalf.
Yes, asking the Voodoo Chief what brings him into the Mardi Gras celebrations and how it's connected to his spirituality.
Can't hear you.
Thank you kindly. Can you hear me now? I'm humbled by the opportunity. I came into the culture as an adult. I consider myself a successful transplant. I grew up in the farthest north region of the South, and that's Maryland. Some would associate that with Gullah Geechee land. I also grew up there during the 70s, Chocolate City, if you will. There was a strong emphasis on Africa. There was a strong emphasis on culture. There was a strong emphasis on family. I've been in New Orleans 25 years, and I first was acknowledged by Sharice Harrison and the Mardi Gras Indian Hall of Fame for my demonstration about the culture by way of my podcast, many of my literary pursuits, and some of my other online demonstrations. A year later, I was invited to mass. I've been masking 8 years. I first masked with Guardians of the Flame, Sharice Harrison Nelson. I then went on to mass with Big Chief Shaka and Daryl Montana and Yellow Pocahontas. And by way of sort of the same or a similar theme that Guardians of the Flame follows and acknowledges, which is the maroon path, I now consider myself in a maroon. When I look at maroon culture, and particularly in Mississippi Delta, Louisiana, and the availability of us to survive our culture, survive our traditions, from a spiritual perspective, I was able to readily identify that almost right away in New Orleans carnival culture. I, like both of the brothers that spoke before me, I make a clear distinction between Mardi Gras culture and Black carnival culture, Black Indian culture. And when I see not just the masking Indians, but the skull and bones, the baby dolls, I see demonstrations of ancestral masquerade coming straight out of West Africa. I see manifestations of voodoo that people don't often associate with voodoo. When I first started masking with the community, there wasn't a whole lot of room for discussion about voodoo, about that imprint, that symbolism showing up in the practice and the tradition. And now I'm seeing it in suits. I'm seeing Congo Square, I'm seeing Marie Laveau, I'm seeing other symbolic representations that, in my opinion, bring our truth to the surface. When I see the acknowledgement of the indigenous people of this land, I'm grateful and I'm humbled. But when I see these suits, I see Africa, and I see Gede, and I see Galede, and I see Egungun, and I see Zangbeto masquerades, which are demonstrated in West Africa. I also connect to the idea that Shaka spoke up about masking and becoming something else, something bigger than yourself, something greater than yourself. And as a medicine man, my position will always be medicine man. My goal is to connect to spirit and to bring about healing and cleansing and balance where it might otherwise be lacking in today's outward culture. As a voodoo practitioner, I deal with a lot of people who don't come into Treme during Carnival, who have very little awareness about what goes on here. And often when I'm asked about parades and Mardi Gras, you know, I don't see that because I'm in this community with my people, absorbing this demonstration. The need for young people today to connect to something is something that I'm uniquely able to see as a spiritual practitioner and a minister. And people want quick magic. They want quick answers. They want quick fixes to things. And we're not always acknowledging the tradition and the history and the lineage that's passed down, again, with this ancient culture. So I come into this culture with respect from a more mature perspective, from an older person's perspective. In my earliest years coming into the culture, I sought those who were older than me, 70 and older, 65 and older, who had been in this practice, like Shaka, all of their lives. And so I take great honor when people see my style and it's not quite as modern, and it does echo something of our past and something that our ancestors would have demonstrated on the street. So I'm humbled by the opportunity. I'm grateful that I was given the opportunity to sort of grow into this culture and become a part of this demonstration and continue the re-edification of the rest of the world about what takes place here in New Orleans, all on a Mardi Gras day.
Thank you. You all have beautiful suits and artifacts in your background. And Peter, I'd like to start with you. If you could tell us about the suit that you made for 2020.
Yeah. So I don't want to give too much away. We still want them to come in and check out the exhibit too. It's going to be beautiful, right, Dad? So
absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Nah, no doubt. This is the back of it here, right, of the crown, and that stone crescent represents the new moon, all right, and a new day that's coming with that new moon. And for some of us, and how we look at life and study the universe, there's a balance that the moon brings to the earth, and it's dealing with the water and all, and there's a certain symbol that represents the power that the women represent in this time, and that a lot of things are out of order because that respect or that wisdom or that honoring of that moon is off sync. You know what I mean? So what I felt was necessary was to tie the past, the present, and the future together through the suit. So by that being the new moon and representing what that represents, that red inside of that represents you see the old Sankofa birds up there. And those Sankofa birds represents our honor and our glorious past, right? Now, for me, what I was able to do was mix a lot of, because we taught not to be dogmatic in our approach to spirituality, right? And that was something that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan guided us to do a few years back, was to, and thankfully so, because in 2020, you couldn't go to the mosque during Ramadan. You know what I mean? You couldn't go to the synagogue during Passover. You couldn't go to church during Easter. So what we were preemptive in doing was to take our spiritual practices outside of a structure. And the way he guided us was saying that there's 9 ministries that may be essential to healing and moving us forward as a people presently. And he advised those of us who had certain inclinations outside of what it is that we were fortunate enough to read or not fortunate enough to read. And in doing that, he set up these ministries, and the Ministry of Art and Culture is one that allows me to see the brilliance in all our expressions, all our cultural expressions, right? From a mind of a student as a humble child, not like my way is the best way or your way is the best way, understanding that it's a source that gives that light to us on this planet. So what I thought was very important was to bring elements from different faith traditions that may not necessarily always see the commonality and the oneness of our existence, right? So, but in doing that, I was still able to put those unks on there to symbolize that regardless to what it is that we're currently facing, then that our eternal life, that's still an option. So when I hit the streets and those children saw that and they responded to it, it let me know that without even having to articulate it, because we can't speak. I have a mask on my head. People can't really hear me. So what I did was to show them through this that we'll never die, that life will be eternal for those who choose that as a choice, right? That's ways and there's history and that culture that totally is different from what the news is saying to us. So I felt if there was that one thing I can do without having to say any words, especially as a poet, it's hard to you know, to express myself other ways through words. So what I was able to do was get these symbols, and these symbols of power, and they have history in and of themselves, that if you see them together, you don't necessarily relate the Stone Crescent. And it's not from the Islamic world as such. Like, this was brought to us, and that as a flag by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Now that next to Sankofa birds, for people who follow a different faith tradition, there was a disconnect for some people that I find myself talking to as I travel in the Ministry of Art and Culture, meeting with different people. So I felt it was only my duty, because the culture of us as a people raised me. And I have an obligation to ensure that the purpose of us having art is never missed by the over bombardments of death and suffering and pain, right? So this suit is the total opposite of that. It's optimism, it's life, it's power, it's strength, you know, it's history. And those symbols represented it. It'll take a task to turn around and spin around and all that, but that's pretty much the spirit that went into it. And it was important for me to wear a mask instead of just a crown with that, in the spirit of what Chief Shaka said and what Brother, Divine said as well, with embodying that. I'm 6'6", right? So I have a certain height myself, but it ain't nowhere near as powerful and as big as it is when you put that mask on. So it was essential that I have a mask on as well. And the weight of the headdress and the headpiece, it was intentionally made to be heavy, because I need to remember that infusing life and optimism in the people that have been historically and systemically oppressed is not something that's going to be a light task. You know, it's not going to be an easy thing to accomplish. So when you put that on, it's a constant reminder that either you're going to shoulder the responsibility or you're not going to do it. You know, but in doing it, that's what that suit represented: life. You know, it connects us to the past, our glorious past. You know what I'm saying? Our glorious present and our glorious future.
Thank you so much. Just a lot to reflect on.
Yeah.
Thank you. Shaka?
Okay, you can hear me now? Yeah, every year I give a lot of thought to my suit. And, you know, unlike the other two gentlemen, I don't have my suit in the background. But this year's suit was about the honeybee. And the honeybee is in trouble. And I try to do something that's very meaningful, as well as I try to have a message in every suit that I make. And so the concept of the honeybee being in trouble was very challenging for me, because one, if you're not familiar with beading, it's a very difficult thing to do as it relates to crafting the suit, especially the wings on the bee. So, but I really enjoyed it because of the message that it was going to send to the world. You know, we understanding how if we don't really take care of the environment, then all of the stuff that we look forward to as it relates to the future of masking will be pretty much out of the picture. You know, if the environment is not healthy, then the culture won't last. So, so that was a very important suit for me. And I think I've only made maybe three or four suits out of over the 20 years of masking where I didn't actually wear a mask. Because like I said earlier, that you know, my energy is just to second what Baba Peter just said. it's really not about me. It's really about the dedication to the work and the craftsmanship and some of the things that we're carrying. So it's going to be rare that you see any of my suits without a mask. Also, wearing a mask this year was a no-brainer because of COVID. You know, even though Mardi Gras or Carnival, should I say, was before this whole epidemic, it was just ironic that we had a mask on anyway, which I feel like could have protected us in a sense, because we did have a mask on. But as it relates to my suits, one of the things I always do, is going to always be present in my suits, is the African tradition from some aspect of it. Even though the honeybee didn't have a whole lot to do with the African continent, but I did have a mask on to make it very clear that masking part of the tradition in this indigenous culture, for me, will always involve some form of African tradition.
Thank you. And Divine Prince, you have 2 suits behind you. Can you discuss the themes of those?
These are 2 of the suits that will be on display at the exhibit. The yellow and green suit, in all honesty, and this is a true story, was my attempt to create a suit that I could stand up next to Shaka with on the street and not look completely out of place. That was my second year in Yellow Pocahontas. And one of the things that I'm grateful for was that, of course, Sharice Harrison sort of allowed us to create a maroon suit. And Daryl Montana didn't seek to alter my style in any way. And so I'm grateful for that opportunity. So with that in mind, I had to create something that wasn't 3-dimensional, you know, like Shaka's suit, but wouldn't look completely flat or unusual, you know, on the street. I always desired to bead my story. I was told that was my job, was to bead my story, to bead my history, to bead my truth. So every suit, first in my imagination, comes from a Egungun, a Yoruba perspective in terms of how I sort of shape and build my suit. But then the beadwork, I attempt to incorporate voodoo symbolism, voodoo veve, while still sort of reinforming my opinion of why we do this, which is to acknowledge the Red Indians, to acknowledge the indigenous people, but to also sort of fly away. You may have heard of the Igbo stories about the flying Africans that would just fly away from the plantation. So when I see the wings on the Shaka suit and the really big, elaborate, traditional Black Indian suits, I see wings and I see the ability to fly. But in my maroon suits, I try to incorporate indigenous totems. The green and yellow suit has snake totems in it, transformation, being reborn, being renewed. Hopefully you'll be able to see that in more detail up close at the exhibit. And the black suit is my Blackhawk suit. I think this is one of Kim's more favorite suits that she had seen me in. And so I have a medicine man, a traditional indigenous medicine man, sort of beaded into the front of the suit. And then I incorporated the healing elements, earth, water, fire, air. into the other symbolism that surrounds the medicine man. The back part of the suit also holds some symbolism that sort of crossroads with more than just one meaning. So I bring forth my serpent totem, healing, wisdom, being renewed, being regenerated. But there's also an element of healing, just a little bit more that I incorporated into this suit that wasn't necessarily in the forefront of my mind when I did the green and yellow suit. Out of the 8 years I've been masking, the black suit at this point is my favorite. But my favorite is always the next suit that I'm going to do. I put all that motivation into the next suit that I'm going to do. So it has to be better than this.
Thank you. I want to ask each of you how COVID is impacting you, especially in terms of Black Carnival. Peter, we'll go with you first.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I think it's layered, right? It's layered. It's layered. Carnival does so much to invigorate the spirit of down, like oppressed people. Like you can't refuse or ignore what it does for our community, right? Like just that spirit, that presence. That to me is something, again, it's almost like we don't have the benefit of having institutionalized things to hold on to right now. Everybody has to figure out a way to become what it is that they're looking for, right? So with COVID, not just looking at the hands of the president and the hands of these other people who are in places who are in position to further chaos and things like that, or take away things from us that we feel is necessary for our healing. Just looking at it as like stepping away from that view of it and looking at it and saying, okay, were we really being appreciated for what it is that we were bringing to the street with our culture? Did it get to a point where it was being taken for granted? Did it get to a point where it was being disrespected so much so that now you can't see it? You know, so a part of me wants to look at it like that because there's a part of me that's still humbuggish. You know, there's a part of me that doesn't mind being confrontational for the culture. So part of it feels like it's a beautiful time to regroup. It's a beautiful time to reassess and reprioritize what it is that you're doing this for, or what it is that you come out to see this for. What is it truly, right? And not just with the culture, but simple practices like you can't go around old people with your hands dirty. You know what I mean? Like physically, spiritually, like there's so many ways to look at it. You have to appreciate life like it's sacred for real. You know, there's so many things that because our history is so long and because in our state of meditation and prayer or reflection, we could tap into ancestral memories that allow us to not panic during times like this. You know what I'm saying? It's not an indication of the breakdown of the entire universal order of things. It's not. So there's still ways for us to exist and do what it is that's very important to us, engage in our ritualistic practices, engage in our spiritual practices. And I really, just on that one note alone, COVID ain't knocked that off. If anything, it inspired us to produce more of the art that we produce to heal, you know?
Yes.
Yeah, for me, I look at this situation of COVID as a wake-up call. I think it's a reminder of how vulnerable our culture is. and how important it is to protect and preserve some of the things that we take for granted. You know, I think sometimes we get caught up with practicing and acting as it relates to culture, and not really concentrate on the small things. You know, I had a mentor who used to always tell me a small thing is a big thing. So I think we just overlooked the force of, at any time, this precious, unique culture can be under attack. And when I say culture, I'm really speaking of a way of life, you know, because for some people, you know, masculine Indian is the culture, but for most people, it's only a part of the culture. When I say culture, I always think of communities, women and children, families, what you put in your body, how you treat yourself, and how you treat others. So I think COVID just made us take a step back and say, man, you know, we got to go back to the beginning of what our value system and principles actually supposed to be. You know, because it's supposed to be about families. It's supposed to be about women and children. It's supposed to be about preservation. It's supposed to be about what you put in your body. It's supposed to be about how you treat people and how you treat yourself and others. So, you know, we just had to, for me, it was something that I looked at as a break. We needed that break to think and analyze how to move forward. You know, we couldn't do that in the midst of all of this stuff happening so fast, simultaneously. So, you know, once again, you know, our tribe is full of children. So it was important for me to make a call this year to not go out, you know, and I'm speaking for myself as it relates to Golden Feather. You know, I can't speak on behalf of other tribes and other Indians, but for me, it's important with children to honor and respect the laws of nature as it relates to this virus. But, you know, at the same time, to give us time to redirect, reflect, come together, brainstorm, and come out a little bit stronger as it relates to family and culture for 2022. So my role as a chief, you know, I have to be mindful of how this culture is so vulnerable, and to make sure that my ears are open to listen to all of the folk that's around me that care about me and love me, to put our heads together, because none of us is smarter than all of us, to make sure that we taking care of ourselves in this tribe in the near future.
Thank you. Divine Prince?
Yeah, I agree that this season of COVID, I like to call it the season of Omolu. The Omolu or Babalu Oye is a deity that's known in many traditions in West Africa in association with disease, pestilence, calamity. But my elders taught me that Omolu Oye represents the antidote, not the problem, but the antidote. So I've seen this season, not just from my own personal perspective, but that of my mother and my siblings and my clients and my friends and family, as indeed an opportunity to connect with spirit. It's unfortunate those whose, you know, incomes have been affected, or heaven forbid have been affected by this virus directly. But for many others, I believe it was sort of the ancestors' way of saying, y'all need to sit down for a minute and think about what you're doing. Think about who you are. Think of what you're bringing. For me, in terms of, you know, how it affects work, it only increased ministry. So I've been really overwhelmed the last 5 months by those who are really stopping now, almost as if for the first time, to really focus in on ancestors, ritual, prayer, meditation, getting greater connections to spirit. And so many of the people that I communicate with every day, we don't really speak about COVID a whole lot. unless they're coming to the house. And then, of course, there's masks and precautions and social distancing. So I'm not in a rush. And Blackhawk Voodoo is not in a rush to sort of come out Mardi Gras 2021. I'm not willing to risk exposing myself or others to whatever might be still happening in terms of this virus. But in terms of the opportunity to create more, I've had an opportunity to not only sew and bead more, but I've had the opportunity to start working on an autobiography that prior to COVID, I never thought I was going to have an opportunity to write. Never thought I was going to be able to organize the time to write. So I've learned how to ration my time better. I've learned how to pay better attention to the health of my schedule, like Shaka just suggested. Paying bills and running from this set to that set or this job or that gig sometimes can be a distraction to interacting with the community, building family, building relationships, really at the grassroots level. And you start passing people, while we're out at the second line, while we're performing, but not taking that time that many of us have had to take now to really connect at a much more intimate level. One of the first things I did right around the second week in March, when we realized things were what they are, I called everybody. I made an attempt to call all the oldest people that I knew, but both here in town, but also in other cities and locations, just to say, I love you, I support you. Do you need something? How can I be of help and or assistance to you? So for me, it's really about ministry. And many of us are uncomfortable with that word because it conjures up very Christian-like things. But I see all forms of ATR, traditional African religious systems, as a form of ministry when we're going at it with the right attitude, when we're going at it with the right sense of humility to spirit. So I'm grateful for COVID-19.
Thank you. What would each of you like people to understand, to know, to walk away with after seeing your work, and all the other work in the exhibit? What do you want people to take away from it? I'll start with Peter.
Well, one thing that I would like to take away is the importance to creating it's the importance of preserving it, and the importance of not empowering us, because we don't get our empowerment from those who govern us, but like understanding our value to the younger generation, and find a way to realize and recognize the greatness of us outside of our talent and outside of our gift. Because some of those chiefs that these people from around the world just find so fun to go run close to on Carnival Day to take a picture with, the same dude that they would have saw the day before and felt threatened by his existence, or felt aggravated by the way he talked, insulted the way he articulates his words, right? So what I would like for people to take away from this is to understand something that a lot of our enslaved ancestors didn't understand, is that we're not ignorant, that we're not illiterate, that because we don't read the way they read, or something, whoever they may be right at this time, right? Because although the education system here in the city doesn't really amount to really the true enlightenment that we need, we didn't learn how to read books for understanding. We learn how to read people and situations for understanding. And our culture and our art expresses that. So there's an intelligence that can't be refuted. There's a mastery in art. It's not no folk art. as such. You know what I'm saying? It's just fine art. This is the highest expression of art that you can find people doing on the planet anywhere. There's chiefs that, you know, I mean, been doing this for so long that we get a collection of work together, the value of that work alone, just with the creativity and the story. So I wanted to realize the intelligence of the people to not only persevere through the oppression, but to create through the oppression. Like the power that truly has to take. I want them to really take that in. You know, like really breathe and understand who it is that's creating this art and what we've been through, right? And then not only does our life matter and, you know, these little slogans, these hashtag things, but yeah. So if they could take that out of the experience, you know, I can go on for a minute because it's passionate, but I think the appreciation for those who create the art and the true appreciation for the fact that we are responsible for ensuring that our children get this art form. So stop killing us, stop funding police and building prisons, and stop doing that to us. Stop making it so hard for a person who's trying to earn a living. That's in turn, you know, there's so many criminalizations that goes along with that. It stops us from being present in the lives of those children, right? So I want them to understand that we are different people. We have different value systems, and we are honorable people. We are organized people. We are very loving and caring and nurturing people. We love our community. There's those of us in this community that's been doing this ever since we've been here that love everything about this place. And the narrative is different. And I want people to walk away from this knowing that there are those of us who understand what our culture needs to heal. And we just need to be left alone to do that.
Thank you so much. Those are going to be echoed. Those words are going to be echoed throughout the show. For Chief Shaka and Voodoo Chief Divine Prince, just 1 minute each because we're almost out of time.
Yeah, I was going to be short anyway.
Shaka?
I think people who practice this culture understand one thing, that is very strenuous. A lot of time and money and energy goes into it. And it's a lot of people that assist you in this process. But what I want people to take away from this is we have a whole group of people that come together and go through that serious work in progress to complete these suits. So it only means that for this culture, we are more unified than divided, contrary to what we hear a lot of times. So just understanding that in our tribe and what we have to endure throughout the year, and you know, it's very hard for us to pull this off. So I want people to understand the unity that happens in this process. So that's pretty much all I want people to take away from that. More unified than divided.
Thank you.
I would like to say two things. One, to the community itself. Take better care of yourselves. Take better care of yourselves. Watch what we're eating. Get more fruits, more vegetables, more grains. Drink more water. We're seeing too many people in our community with cancers and the diabetes and the heart problem. And as Shaka and Brother Peter have already eloquently shared, the trauma, the stress on your body in sitting for hours beating and then carrying the weight of a suit, you know, in all sorts of weather. So take care of yourself. And the second thing I want to say to the greater community, and this has a lot to do with the sort of the title. It's more to Mardi Gras than what's going on St. Charles Avenue. And as a successful transplant, it's really weird to me when I meet people who are born and raised here who don't know what's going on this side of the city, who don't have a whole lot of awareness about baby dolls, about skull and bones, about Mardi Gras Indians. So I hope that, you know, sort of this COVID season and the lack of parades possibly give people an opportunity to explore other aspects of carnival season than just what happens on St. Charles Avenue.
Thank you so much, all of you. Everybody in the community and around the world will have opportunities to communicate with you throughout the year. I thank you for your participation and your blessings on the street and what you do to preserve our unique culture here.
You're quite welcome.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Take care of yourselves and of each other. That's a beautiful message to be left with at the end of this discussion. Thank you so much for your words of wisdom, and I cannot wait to see the exhibit at the Louisiana State Museum when it opens up in January. Thank you to them again for sponsoring. We have 9 minutes, and then we'll be back with this evening's closeout event, which is an evening with John Warner Smith, who is the current Louisiana Poet Laureate. He'll be doing a reading, and then he'll be interviewed by Christopher Luis Romaguera. Also, don't forget that this entire experience, these 4 days, are accessible to the entire community on a donation basis. If you can give $1 or $1,000, we appreciate you. We know COVID's have hit our wallets hard, and we're really excited that this is a festival where our community can come together no matter what you can pay. And if you can pay nothing because COVID's really hit you hard, that's cool too. So you can support us by clicking those links in the comment sections. You can go to PayPal, wordsandmusicnola@gmail.com, or you can go to your phone and you can text WAM20 WAM20 to 44321. We appreciate you. We will see you now in 8 minutes with an evening with John Warner Smith. Talk to you soon.